From what I've learned from IES, back to the throne means that it's when our hearts get back to God, and when we finally reach to God, like we get closer and get to know more about Him as we learn to love Him and worship Him.
I think for me, in our daily life, we sort of, I would say, distant ourselves from God with all of the earthly things that happen in our lives. And so back to the throne, for me, is us going back to the throne and like realigning our life into God's hand and God's perspective.
Back to the throne symbolizes God coming back to the earth for the second time. And I'm excited. Yay.
From what I've learned, back to the throne is like when you, instead of putting earthly things on the throne of your heart, you put God back. So God's always asking for you back, but in the end there will always be something that is gonna be there that kind of replaces His part and makes you prioritize it over Him. So I think going back to the throne means going back to God and putting Him in your number one priority.
For me, it means that putting God first, basically. That's what it means for me.
Back to the throne for me, I would think it's just returning back to God and just getting rid of all the sin and shame you've been through, and just, going back to Him and like being able to talk to Him again from all the bad things.
To me, back to the throne means we're putting Jesus back on the throne of our lives, and back to the focus of our hearts. It means that Jesus is the only rightful one for the throne, and it's like this conference is giving us a chance to recognize that and to just implant that in our life.
So I think that back to the throne means that as a child of God, it's within our, as a child of God, we have to always return back to God, return to the sender. God has always sent us blessings, and we always have to go back to Him, praising Him, giving thanks to Him. And what back to the throne really means to me is that as children of God, we have to go back, we have to communicate with Him. We have to be able to establish a very good connection with Him. So that's what back to the throne really means to me.
Back to the throne actually means, to me, is Jesus coming back to take control for my life, because Jesus is, as we know, the pandemic has taken an impact on us teenagers, including on and controlling us, like technology. We were getting addicted with technology and stuff, and we were going to get entertained. We wanted to go back to the life that Jesus controlled us, because Jesus needs to take control of our life once more in order to take us to the right way.
For me, back to the throne means that we're going back to God. So we've been separated from God on our own, like on our devices. The whole pandemic happened. Back to the throne for me means that we just gone adrift, and now we are just setting sails back to Him.
To me, back to the throne means it's a time of worship. It's a time where you're close to God. Well, you're close to God every day, but it's a time where you're really vulnerable towards Him, and you feel at home whenever you're listening. Yeah.
Okay, I think back to the throne means that we have to put Jesus where our lives are and center it around Him. And it also means that we can't have any other distractions that can pull you away from Him.
So for me, back to the throne, after having the conference in a way, I learned back to the throne is basically we have to go back to the throne and prioritize God in our life and put Him there on the throne, because He's the only one who is worthy of it.
Back to the throne means, I think, everything, starting from where we were created as a human in His image. And I think back to the throne means giving all to God
including our hearts, and putting our position, ourselves, lower than God so that we can see Him in His throne and He was on top of everything else.
So back to the throne means to me that reconnecting and kind of like learning more about God and what it means to kind of like be one of His disciples, I guess.
Welcome to a very special episode of Take a Beat. That's what. We're at Back to the Throne conference.
Yeah.
I am here with Pastor Josh Gunza.
Let's go.
Who is our teens pastor, and he just got done speaking at our first session. And what did you talk about? I was there, but I need you to talk about it.
I talked about laying down our crowns and passage from Revelation chapter 4, how only God alone deserves to sit on the throne. And when we look at the elders, what they did was they worshiped God and they laid down their crowns before the throne. And I think for us at times, like we get so busy with life, and although we're Christian, although we follow God, although we attend church, I think it's so easy for us to put other things in life on our thrones that aren't God. Yeah. Even like things that are like your day-to-day things, but they just end up consuming us or becoming so important to us that they become more important than God in our lives. And so I felt like we all just, myself including, needed that reminder, kind of needed to do some like revamping in our lives and kind of like really recalibrating and checking ourselves and making sure that God's the one who sits on the throne, and it's only God who sits on the throne.
And I think you mentioned this, and we can unpack it a little bit, but you mentioned that some of these things that we put on that throne in our lives, other than God, they're actually good things. Yeah. They're not like bad things, but they're good. It's like grades. Yeah. Technology isn't bad. Especially if you're the digital pastor.
That's right.
It's not bad.
Yeah.
And even like entertainment isn't bad. Yeah. And
money
isn't bad.
Yeah.
But some of these good things, you said this, when we put that on the throne, it becomes destructive because
it becomes the ultimate thing when the ultimate thing should be God.
Yeah.
Right?
And because I think one of the things that you said was that God is the only one worthy of that throne, which means like anything else put there is not worthy. And so they just don't have the capacity to be the king.
That's right.
Right. And so some of the things that you got very personal, especially about the phones.
Yeah.
But some of the things that you mentioned are like those good things that are everyday things. So my question for you, you brought up the word idolatry.
Yes.
And so sometimes we think of idolatry, we think of these like old-fashioned statues that people like bow down to.
Yes.
And so what's this new take on idolatry, or is it new take?
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, like idolatry, like we see it in the Old Testament, people being led into the promised land, or through that journey, people worship idols. So I mean, all through the Old Testament, or at times idolatry is viewed as like, if between a husband and a wife and someone then sleeps with somebody else, they've committed adultery. Yeah. You know, but it's beyond that. It's if by placing anything other than God in our life as an idol, that's why all these different things that I mentioned in my message, like grades, entertainment, I introduced them as like modern day idols. And although idols might not be a golden calf or anything or something like that, but it's the idols which we've kind of like unconsciously let creep into our lives, and they've become the idols we now somewhat worship, when only God is worthy of our worship.
Yeah. And actually you brought up the golden calf thing just now, and isn't that what they did? It's not about the statue or the image, but what the Israelites did with the whole golden calf thing was they were supposed to worship God, but they end up saying, oh, this is our God. And so they created this thing and started worshiping this thing. And it's not really about the calf. It's not even about the thing, but putting something in the place that only God is worthy, I think is a huge thing. And like you said, these days we get lulled to maybe like focusing on good things that isn't worthy to be the most important thing.
Yeah. And like I said, I think as I was writing that message, I really wanted it to be a reflective message, like one where, as I was going through it, you're kind of like, wait a minute, did I just, am I doing that?
Yeah.
Because it's like I said, it's not that we intentionally say like, oh, money is everything.
Yes.
Or like, oh, grades are everything. It's like, we know we love God, but like, that's why I wanted it to be reflective, because sometimes we don't realize that all of these other things are the ones that end up consuming our lives.
Yeah.
And then take the throne of our lives. Like I said, like entertainment, not a great thing, but it's like we just crave after it. We long after it.
It's the binge watching. When you have been watching Netflix so much that Netflix is asking you, are you still watching? Are you like and then you click next.
Exactly. Where it's like
not from experience at all, people.
Maybe next podcast on honesty and truth. But yeah, so like I said, I really hope that the first session of the Back to the Throne conference, especially since we have Pastor Mario and Pastor Dea sharing in our evening sessions, kind of gets everyone in this reflective stage of kind of like, well, where am I in life right now? Because it's easy to kind of just be like, oh, I'm a Christian, I go to church, I love Jesus, that's great, but like, it's so easy. And again, we see in the Bible, everything, we get seduced, we get misled, misdirected, we drift away.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just to start off this conference, it's kind of like, well, hold up a second. Let's think about this for a moment.
Yeah.
Where are we at? And where do we want to go?
And I think what the challenge is in this first session, it's not really about like, oh, thou shalt do this, but it's more of your challenge is to be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
And that's huge for us to be honest with ourselves, and even saying, okay, how much time are you putting into this?
10 hours of screen time.
I know, that's what we found out from today's first session.
I'm not going to check mine, y'all.
10 hours. Well, I was telling someone who was sitting next to me, I was like, I'm the digital pastor. I have to be on myself.
How do you differentiate the two tiers?
Well, when I'm on like planning center. But yeah, and I think, taking inventory is very important, and that's what we've been doing. This session, I feel like, was all about that, maybe brutally honest, being brutally honest with ourselves and saying, you know what, I love Jesus, but I think in my application, I've loved this thing probably a little bit more than Jesus.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's hard being honest with ourselves, but it is something that we shouldn't shy away from, right? And actually, one of the things that I observed from that, the teens did soap earlier from Revelation 4, right? And what I observed is there's a lot of like these images in Revelation, like the creatures with the eyes, like these are the stuff of nightmares, people.
Yeah.
But these are the creatures who are like flying around singing, holy, holy, holy is the Lord. But I think the most shockingly personal act of worship wasn't the creature with the eyes. The most shocking act of worship was laying down of the crowns.
Yeah.
Because it's personal.
Yeah.
And I think, so like, what do you think, what's your, I would say, not wish, prayer for the teens and for everyone who's now thinking about this and maybe going back to and reading Revelation 4, what's your hope and prayers for people as they kind of reflect through this?
Like I said, I think we live in such a world where everything, it's so easy now to project or portray certain images, you know. But I think at IS we always say we don't care where you've been, we care where you're going.
Yeah.
And so it's really my hope that whether you're a teen that's attending a conference, whether you're an adult leader, whoever you may be, and you're attending Back to the Throne conference, is that we have the courage to be honest with ourselves, not to be vulnerable and real, knowing that God still loves you, but also just for that spiritual awakening, you know, to kind of just be able to view themselves in a completely new light, you know, one where God sits on the throne.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's my hope and prayer, I guess, for this conference and for everybody who's in attendance of it.
So tell, as we kind of wrap up, tell the audience a little bit about this Back to the Throne. Why Back to the Throne?
Back to the Throne conference was something that we thought about, I think, beginning of the year. We knew we wanted to have a conference. We weren't sure of what we wanted to name it. We were also working on an EP, and actually Titus, as we were going back and forth, who for those of you who are tuning in who aren't familiar with Titus, although he has been on Take a Beat, works with me in the teens ministry. He said, what about Back to the Throne? And because we were talking about like realignment and how we need a kind of like our overall theme for the year is also perspective where God is just in the center of it all, you know, and I think not only is God in the center of it all, he is also worthy of all our praise and of all our worship.
Of everything.
Of everything, because he sits on the throne, you know, and so it's kind of just like putting God, I mean, like I said, he's all powerful, almighty, he's holy, he's on the throne, but I think for our own personal lives and how we go through things, we tend to let other things creep in. You know, and I think we just need to put God back on the throne of our lives where he rightfully deserves to be seated.
Yeah, and you mentioned an EP, so this is your little like smooth segue.
LOVE. Check it out, y'all, on Spotify, iTunes, and all that good stuff. Back to the Throne by IS Teens.
See, I am giving you a platform. So I think that's what I love actually is that this conference, I know conferences, a lot of the times when people think about conferences, they're thinking about like this hype, like light shows with which we do have lights, and all of these like big things going on. But I love that this conference is actually an opportunity to take a beat and think about and realign and do all of the necessary things to be able to live life with the right king on the throne.
Amen.
So thank you so much for joining us. And I'm excited. This is only first session.
Yeah.
And so we're just kind of bringing you along on this journey back to the throne.
Come with us.
And so
back to the throne.
It's very yellow. I'm
Back in yellow.
Okay.
Insert that, please. Insert that. Director, please insert it. Director.
I am still, making peace with the color scheme, but we're so excited. And so join us if you have your own kind of epiphany and you want to write it down in the comments. We would love to hear from you how you are reflecting on what it means to go back to the throne. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Pastor Josh, for sharing with us. And so we'll see you next time on Take a Beat.
Ciao. Auf Wiedersehen. Goodbye.
One thing God has taught me, I think with Pastor Mario's message, I think that life is very good, and that is the best thing that I would ever want to hear at a sermon, because it just has to remind us that sometimes in life we can be feeling really, really bad. We can be at the lowest points of our life, but if we read the Bible, we can always see that life is actually really good, and we just have to think about the positive side of it.
I've learned a lot of things in this conference, but what mainly stood out to me is just how to be closer to God. And that's what I appreciate most, because oftentimes I find it hard to connect and be sincere with God, and this conference has taught me that.
Through this conference, on the first day, I realized that Jesus is not at my throne. Instead, I spent most of my time, and I found myself the happiest when I was with my friends instead of when I am in God's presence, and I thought that was a real issue. So yeah, I'm glad that this conference revealed that to me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have thought. So yeah, thank you, IES students.
IES is very good at making whole day events.
Basically, that we cannot put materialistic things first. Just we need to put God first, basically.
I think for me it's the same, that people come and go, and that God will always be there for you. He will always be worthy of your worship, and that whatever comes, whether it's university or the challenges we struggle, that God is always going to be there for you, even if you have nobody.
I learned that I just got here like 1 week ago, and I learned more about the church and more about my friends and everything. I learned about the pastors. Pastors are actually really nice, and so are my friends. We really relate to each other sometimes. We relate to each other in this church. I hope I can do more in the future with God and my friends.
For me, and what I learned from Back to the Throne conference, I've learned multiple things like many friends, how to interpret the Bible, what its definition is, and well, some stuff is not yet understood for me. But I hope to spend my time here to understand and learn more about Jesus, God, and the Bible.
One thing that I've learned from this conference is that like no matter where I am or who I am with, that I can always like talk to God, and He'll always be there for me. And also that I'm also very competitive in the games that I play, and it's really fun.
For me, this conference has taught me a lot about how being creative isn't just for like specific people, and everyone is creative in their own ways.
So I think God has taught me to always trust in Him wherever we are, especially when we are in church, when we read the Bible, or when we're in prayer. We always have to trust Him. And I think if you're finding difficulties, then you must ask Him for help. Like, don't just like say, God, no, but yeah, ask Him for help.
Well, I learned through this conference that during worship, when Posh had the mic, I learned that God isn't just supposed to be at church. You're supposed to worship Him every day, and you're close with Him every day, and He's always there for you, not just at church.
I think for me, what stood out to me is like good things can become bad things. It's like good things, if you let it consume you, it can be a bad thing, and you have to direct our focus to another thing. And that is God.
Yeah. And for me, I think it's to make time for God, spending time with Him and just like getting to know Him more, yeah.
Maybe that during worship, I had a lot of fun during the praise and worship, and I've never really let my heart out before, but during worship I really realized that it's actually really fun and very touching.
I think that from conference, I feel like that God has shown me that I need Him throughout my life, and how He's been trying to speak to me through reading the Bible from the Bible workshop?
I took the Bible 101 workshop, and I think that was really helpful because Pastor Theory provided us with tips and ways that we can read the Bible to make it easier and more enjoyable. And I think that was very helpful because I think I need to spend more